This video is now in session, and today we are talking about the U.S. House. Now, a lot of people say that the Republicans are going to retake the House in 2022, and they are very likely to do so. But here is why the Republicans aren't set to take as many seats as they did in 2010 or even in 2014. So this is our website, Partisan Irony. We updated it a few days ago, a little bit less than a week ago, and you'll see we have our outlooks, our forecasts for the governor's races, the Senate races, and the House of Representative races. So you can go to each of these pages to look at our ratings without us having to make a video. But we are still going to make these videos to explain more about our projections. So let's start with the kinds of competitive House races that we'll see. So there are a ton of Democratic incumbents who are frontliners, as the Democratic Party calls them. And the frontliners are basically representatives who are most likely or most vulnerable to lose their seat in 2022. And there are dozens of frontliners in this election. Now, these frontline districts, we can mostly place them into two categories: working class districts and then also suburban districts. So working class districts are your more blue collar districts where there are a ton of manufacturing workers, industry workers, ex-urban populations. And then you also have suburban districts, those who commute to the city, those who are on the wealthier side. So those are the two main districts that you will see in the 2022 election. And what will most likely happen is, in the majority of these races, the suburban districts, for the most part, stay Democratic, but the working class districts, especially those in the Rust Belt, they become Republican. They flip from Democratic to Republican. So if we look at Washington and Oregon, for example, Washington had this district right here, Kim Schreier's district, which is rated as toss-up under the 2022 consensus map for Washington's 8th district. This is a suburban Seattle district, so there's suburban Seattle, and then there's also the rural parts of Washington state. But the majority of the population is suburban, and given that abortion is such a hot topic right now, and it will most likely remain a hot topic until the election, we can very well see a ton of suburban voters reconsider their switch to the Republican Party and possibly continue on with a vote for the incumbent. Kim Schreier is the incumbent, and she is running for re-election. Now, if we look at 538, they rate this seat as likely Democratic, so a 76% chance of Kim Schreier winning, and we rate it as a lean Democratic race. So Schreier will most likely win this race by between 0 points and 5 points. Here they have 5.4 points. So that's an example of a suburban seat. And you'll see that in these two Oregon suburb districts. So Oregon's 6th district, which is it used to be Kurt Schrader's district, but he was knocked off in the primary by Jamie McLeod. And then you also have Oregon's 6th district, which even though it is more Democratic than Oregon's 5th district, there is not a Democratic or a Republican incumbent, so there's not really an incumbent in general, and because of that, we rate it as lean. In California, look out for California's 13th district, the Central Valley district. There are more working class voters there. And then David Villalobos' seat, they rate it here as toss-up, but he's an incumbent and he's a Republican, so we believe he'll actually fare better off. Who is more vulnerable, in our opinion, is Mike Garcia. So this is, I believe, the 27th district, and this is more of the outer LA districts. And the reason why he's vulnerable is because there are a lot of commuter workers who do care about abortion. If we look at this Axios Google Trends chart, what you'll see is in California's 27th district, there is a high relative interest in abortion, as you can see by these Google searches in the past week. So they out of all the districts, California's 27th has the 82nd highest amount of searches for abortion. So that's our rationale for that district being lean. Now, what isn't lean is the Orange County districts. More specifically, Katie, more specifically, Young Kim's seat, Michelle Steele's seat, and as well as Katie Porter's seat. And the reason why we don't rate any of these seats as lean or likely is primarily, or actually do we rate? Okay, well, we don't rate the Republicans as lean or tilt Republican seats because if you look at the California primary from 2022, in those races, the Republicans, Young Kim and another Republican, they got over 55% of the vote in that primary. If you look at Michelle Steele's seat, she got close to 60% of the vote. So because of that, we can't really confidently say that either seat will turn out to be super competitive in 2022, especially because both of these Orange County districts have had a history of voting Republican before 2018. If you look at Katie Porter's seat, this is California's 47th district. If you go all the way down here, we rate this seat as lean. So Katie Porter is a progressive, which makes us rate this as a lean Democratic seat. But the reason why we don't rate it as a lean Republican seat is because of name brand and name recognition. Katie Porter has made a brand for herself on the basis of using a whiteboard to attack elitists and corporate leaders for their policies, and because of that, she has both a ton of cash from a ton of national Democrats, and she also has name recognition and respect from her districts. So that's why we think that this district, California's 47th, will remain Democratic. In Arizona, the second district, Kirkpatrick, the incumbent Democrat, is retiring. And because of that, we think the seat is Republican, especially because this seat is rated as R+6, around R+6. And that's really hard for a Democrat to retain in such a red wave year. What's even harder, though, is Tom O'Halloran's district. So Tom O'Halloran, the Democratic representative from the 1st district, is in a very vulnerable position. In fact, probably the most vulnerable out of any Democratic incumbent. And the reason why that's so is because his district went from being a D+6, a R+6 or 7 or R+6 to 7 to an R+15 district. An R+15 district is incredibly hard for a Democrat to have these days. There hasn't been a recent example of a Democrat holding an R+15 district from the 2020 election, so there's not really much reason to see how Tom O'Halloran will have an easy time winning re-election there. And then you see in this district, I believe it's the 6th district, Arizona's 4th district. This is the Mesa region just outside of Phoenix, and this is Greg Stanton's district. We rate this as lean Democratic because even though, if there wasn't an incumbent, we would rate this as Republican because it's only a D+1 district. But as Mayor Greg Stanton was pretty popular with Phoenix and the Phoenix metro area voters, so because of that, we think that this seat is going to stay Democratic. What's not going to stay Democratic, though, in our opinion, is Nevada's 3rd district. The reason why we rate Nevada's 3rd district as lean and Republican is because even though this is a suburban district of Las Vegas, there are a ton of retirees there, and there are a ton of working class individuals there, even though it still is plurality suburban Las Vegas voters. But because there are retirees, and there are a ton of retirees in this district, they are more likely to vote Republican in the first place, and because of that, we think that this seat will be Republican because of the combination of working class voters and retirees. So that's Nevada's 3rd district, and that's most of the West Coast except for, I guess, Colorado's 8th district. So Colorado's 8th district is northern Denver, and we rate this as lean Republican because um, even though this seat is trending heavily towards the Democratic Party, and as has Colorado as a whole, 2022 is just not the year for the Democrats to be targeting this district. So we say this is a lean Republican seat. And then here, if we go to Kansas, this is Kansas's 3rd district. This is Sharice Davids' seat, and she will have a very tough time because this district used to be D+3 to D+4. Now it is an R+3 district. And any R-rated district is going to be incredibly hard for the Democrats to retain in the 2022 election. And we believe that it'll just be too much for representatives like Davids to try to flip voters from the issues of inflation and the economy and a lingering recession, or not a lingering recession, but fears of a recession. Economic issues at the end of the day are the most important issues for a ton of working class voters. If you look at here, abortion is has a really relatively low interest in this district. But if you look at the economy, the economy as in general, or no, inflation rather, it's a little bit higher on the list at 315. So because of that, it's generally we'd rate those kinds of working class seats as lean Republican. If you look at Pennsylvania's 3rd district, I believe this is the 7th district. This is Susan Wild's district. She's a Democrat, and even though a lot of voters in this district like her for helping their district, ultimately their fears of inflation trump those efforts by representatives like Susan Wild, and as a result, we rate this as a flip for the Republican Party. The same thing goes for Connor Lamb's district. Connor Lamb is going to vacate this district, but Pennsylvania 17th, we think that will go towards the Republican Party. And that also applies to the New York districts and these areas, like Oneida County and then north of Westchester County. These districts, they are probably going to go to the Republican Party, especially because neither of them have a Democratic incumbent. Antonio Delgado, the Democratic incumbent from this district, vacated this seat to become lieutenant governor of New York. And then you also have Sean Patrick Maloney, the representative from this district, who took the time to vacate his district and move down south from New York's 16th or 18th district to New York's 17th district. This district used to be Mondaire Jones's district, New York 17th, but then Representative Maloney moved down here because I guess he viewed that this district was too hard for him to win at a safe level. So because of that, Mondaire Jones, I don't know why I keep calling his last name James, but Mondaire Jones, his district, he has moved down to New York's 10th district, which is being vacated by Jerry Nadler, who is going against Representative Maloney in this Midtown district right here in New York's 12th. So there are a ton of switches in New York, and it will be pretty interesting to see what happens in their primary on August 23rd. But yeah, it's just valid to note that these two districts are probably going to be Republican. The reason why we rate this district, though, New York's 22nd, as a flip towards the Democratic Party, is because of the Republican candidates in this race. The Republican candidates in New York's 22nd district are not that I guess highly. They're not well known compared to the Democratic counterparts. If you look at the Republican primary, these are the two candidates, and then if you look at the Republican primary, you have a Navy Reserve commander, and you also have former state assemblyman. So because of that, because of their background, they're more likely to be voted in than these two candidates. And this is also a D+4 district compared to this R+4 or R+1 district. So we think this is going to be lean Democratic. New Hampshire. New Hampshire is, both of them are lean Democratic districts, primarily because both of these districts are competitive. This one's R+1 and this one's, I think, D+3 or somewhere around there. Now, obviously, this district, the incumbent Ann Kuster, she is more likely to win than the representative from this district, who is the Democratic Chris Pappas, primarily because her district is more Democratic. But we do think both of them will win because they have relatively high name recognition, especially Ann Kuster of her district. So we rate both of these as lean Democratic. Now, Jared Golden's district in Maine's 2nd congressional district. Maine's 2nd congressional district. This is a more interesting race because the challenger to Jared Golden is what is it? Why? Okay. Yeah, it's Bruce Poliquin, I believe is his name. And the reason why that name is interesting is because Bruce Poliquin was the representative from Maine until 2018 when he was ousted by Jared Golden. So this is an interesting race to watch, especially because in Maine's governor's race, it's a relatively close race between the incumbent Governor Janet Mills and the Republican challenger Paul LePage, who also happened to have that seat formally before he was ousted by Janet Mills. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. But I do think that the Democrats or that Representative Golden will win in this race because he has taken a Joe Manchin approach to a ton of Democratic bills. He has presented a no vote on a ton of Democratic bills, like I believe the Build Back Better Act and as well as the American Rescue Plan. And both of those plans are turning out to be not that popular anymore with a ton of these working class districts because many working class individuals fault those two bills, or primarily, I guess, the American Rescue Plan, for causing inflation in the United States. So the fact that Jared Golden voted no in both of them gives him a level of respect in Maine, and I believe he'll be able to edge out over Bruce Poliquin. So now we move on to the Rust Belt states. So we already talked about Pennsylvania. Let's talk about Ohio. Ohio's 9th district. So this is Marcy Kaptur's seat, and Ohio's 9th district. This is one that I struggle to make a decision on because this district is an R+. It's a Republican district. I'm gonna see if I can try to find the specific rating, but it's a Republican district by around 6 to 9 percentage points, and Marcy Kaptur is trying to win re-election in that district. Now, in many other cases, I would say that a Republican would win, but there are two factors that lead me towards going for the Democratic side. So the first thing is that Marcy Kaptur is essentially a populist. She has been a representative from this district for several decades at this point, and she's one of the most senior Democrats out there. So she's built herself a name recognition. Or I guess a name brand. So yeah, she's well known. The second thing is that her opponent is not that good. J.R. Majewski is a rapper, and he has a lot of baggage considering his claims on January 6th and a lot of his other comments. So because of that, because of those two factors of populism and a bad Republican candidate, we think that this district will actually be lean Democratic instead of tilt Republican, as 538 puts it here. And just as a side note, we don't use tilt ratings at this point for these seats because it's very hard for us to judge, I guess, tilt races versus lean races, so we decided to just lump the two together. So hopefully that's fine, but it allows us to create more accurate forecasts. So that's Ohio. Now, Michigan. Michigan has a ton of competitive districts and a ton of competitive races, probably the most per capita of any state this year. But let's go through them. So we have Peter Mayo's seat in Michigan's 3rd district, and this is kind of hard to call because the primary has not happened yet, and Peter Mayer could very well actually lose this primary to a Trump-endorsed candidate. So if he does lose that, we might actually change this rate into lean Democratic. But if Peter Mayer does actually win this his Republican primary, then we do think he'll go well against Hillary Clinton, the Democratic challenger in the 2022 election, and we would rate this seat as likely Republican. And that's because Peter Mayer is incredibly moderate as a representative, and he has expressed that through many interviews, and he has also put himself out there in the media. So yeah, we'd rate this, even though this is a D+4 district, I believe, we still rate this as a lean Republican district. Now, Alyssa Slotkin is kind of the opposite of that. Alyssa Slotkin, or I guess the flip side, she's a moderate Democrat, and she is able to galvanize a ton of voters, and we think that even in a D+, or this is a Republican district, I believe, but a Republican rated district, but even in a Republican rated district, because she's the incumbent and because she has put herself out there like Peter Mayer, and because there are a ton of voters in this district who do care about abortion, we would rate this district as lean Democratic. Now, moving north to Michigan's 8th district. This is Dan Kilde's district, and this is a D+1 district. Now, initially, I didn't know that much about Dan Kildee, but apparently he's pretty popular with his district, and that shows through his previous elections. If we go to the Michigan election pages, and if we look at Dan Kildee, then you'll find that he's won previous elections by pretty large margins, even in Republican wave years, like in 2014, for example. So if we go to his elections, 2012 is not. 2012 was a Obama year. So if we go to 2014, and if we go to that same district, which is currently D+1 as well, and if we go, so I believe, let's just use this. So if you look at this district, Dan Kildee was able to win by 30 percentage points. That's a very large margin against a Republican in a red wave year. And mind you, the district down south that Alyssa Slotkin currently holds was went to the Republicans by a likely margin. So Dan Kildee is essentially the Brian Fitzpatrick of Michigan's 8th district. Is it 8? No, I keep confusing these districts, but of Michigan's 5th district. So we'd rate this seat as lean Democratic, maybe even likely Democratic. And then there's also Michigan's 10th district. This is where Macomb County is, and even though it is rated as a Republican district, Macomb County votes kind of oddly. It voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and then it stayed with Donald Trump in 2020, and now and it voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012. So it is like a Rust Belt district, but the Democratic candidate, which I believe is Carl Malinga, he is a relatively well-known state representative or a state member of Michigan Senate, Michigan State Senate. So because of that, that is certainly going to make this race more competitive, especially because he is going against John James. John James is the Republican expected nominee, and John James is, if you know him, he's ran for both Michigan Senate seats, and he's lost in both of them to the Democratic Party. So that's something to note. And another thing to note is that he has been, I guess, blasted for being a carpetbagger in this race, because he hasn't really had any roots in Michigan's 10th district. He has had roots in Michigan, but not in the 10th district. So that's something to note, and we'd rate this seat as lean Republican. So that's Michigan's district, or Michigan's districts. And what else is there to note? Oh, we have Iowa. So Iowa's third district. So this is Cindy Axne's seat. This is her working class district. And even though she has done a lot for this district, and many voters recognize that, it's similar to Pennsylvania's district, Susan Wild's district, in that even though that Cindy Axne has done a lot as a Democrat, many voters just don't care about that, or don't value that as much as the economic and national environment. So we rate this seat as lean Republican, and you'll see that reflected in the polls, and as well as by 538. If we look at 538, this is also lean Republican, and it only gives a 28% chance of Cindy Axne to, I guess, win re-election. We also have Illinois' 17th district. It functions a lot like Iowa's 3rd district. And then Illinois' 13th district, I think that the Democrats will still end up fine here, given that it's a D+7 seat after gerrymandering efforts by the Illinois Democratic Party. What else? Oh, we also have Virginia and North Carolina and Maryland to go. Yeah, there's a ton of districts, 435, and there's like 50, 50 districts or 40 districts that are in contention in this election. So we'll speed run through these. So Maryland's 6th district. This is David Trone's seat. David Trone used to be in a much better position until the Supreme Court of Maryland rejected the gerrymandered maps by the Maryland Democrats, and now it's at most, I think it's a D+4 seat. It's a toss-up district, essentially. And so we still rate this as lean Democratic because David Trone is the incumbent, and and abortion obviously is very important in the DMV area. So we give that to David Trone. But it will definitely be a competitive race, because if you look up here, this sliver of Maryland, it's heavily Republican and heavily working class voters, and they could very well turn out on the basis of the economy. So this is really a working class versus, I guess, elitist DC district or race for David Trone or the expected Republican candidate Neil Parrott. So that is the state of Maryland. If we look at Virginia, we actually are pretty antagonistic towards Elaine Laurier's district. So this is Virginia's 2nd, I believe. And 538 rates it as lean Republican, but we actually rate it as likely Republican. The reason why is because after the courts drew the maps in Virginia, this district is more than R+5. I think it's an R+6 district, and that's really bad for Laurier's chances, because typically, I mean, for almost every single district here in the United States that are Republican rated districts, we don't give it to the Democratic Party. So that's going against her. And the other thing is that it's an R+6 district. So yeah, we in a Republican year. So the Republican margin is set to be larger than what the rating is. So because of that, we rate it as likely Republican. And then we have Virginia 7th District. We rate this as lean Democratic. And the reason why we rate it as lean Democratic rather than lean Republican, it comes down to 2 reasons. First, there are a ton of suburban voters who commute from the Fredericksburg region in this district to Washington, D.C., and they're definitely going to care about abortion. And then the other thing is that Abigail Spanberger is very known for being moderate. She has commented that fact a ton in 2020, and that will most likely retain for 2022. So we rate that as lean Democratic. Now, finally, the state of North Carolina. So let's talk about that lean Democratic district you see there. That is North Carolina's 1st district, and even though 538 rates it as likely Democratic, we rate it as lean because there is not an incumbent. G.K. Butterfield, the Democratic incumbent, is not running for re-election. And this district is a rural black district. It's a VRA district that is meant to, it's meant to bolster African Americans. And even though that is true, that doesn't mean all black Americans vote Democratic. In this district, there are a ton of black Americans who vote Republican, especially because it is a rural district. So we rate that as lean Democratic rather than as likely. And it's a D+6 or 5 district, so it's only just on the side of not being a toss-up district. So given that, and this being a Republican wave here, we say this is lean instead of likely. Now finally, we have North Carolina's 13th district. We would rate this as likely Republican under a generic ballot, but the reason why we rate it as lean Republican is because Bo Hines, the Republican nominee, is more on the conservative side, and this district is shifting to the left very quickly. So because of that, we don't quite think that he'll win it by more than 5 percentage points compared to a moderate Republican who may attract more suburban voters. And yeah, this district, for context, is basically a Raleigh suburb district where you have the southern parts of Raleigh and the suburbs of Raleigh. So that encapsulates pretty much every single important or good to know race in the United States. That was a ton, but if you want a simpler version of all of this, or if you want to just keep updated on this, we will be periodically updating our outlook for the House races, and you'll see here that this is from June 28th. And we already made one change. That being in New Mexico, and we'll probably make a change in Rhode Island next time. In Rhode Island's 2nd district, where the polls are actually showing this race as pretty close between the Democrats and the Republican candidate. So we'll definitely change this throughout the weeks and months leading up to the 2022 election. But that's our explanation of most of these competitive races, and we'll be making videos for the Senate races and the governor's races. So that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.